Hello and welcome to the Price of Football. It's nice to start a show on Kieran laughing, that's good. The show that looks at the money behind the beautiful game. I'm Kevin Day, and the one chuckling over there in the corner in Sussex is Liverpool University's Kieran Maguire. And Kieran, after a lot of our loyal listeners actually saw Mrs. Day and the Baroness on Monday night, I'm afraid to say it's the opinion of many of that a lot of loyal listeners that we are punching above our weight in terms of our respective partners.
Yeah, I've been told that on many an occasion. So I think producer Guy is currently in negotiation for the film rights of this podcast. And I believe now, having seen those comments, that both Brad Pitt and George Clooney have pulled out of playing the pair of us.
You, I don't know if you deliberately placed yourself slightly angled ahead of the Baroness, but you couldn't see what I can only describe as a half-hour masterclass of comedy face acting going on behind you, which, especially as the team named Russian Girlfriend slowly climbed to the table. Now, Kieran, later in the programme, you will be chatting to Plymouth Argyle owner Simon Hallett, who I think is firmly on the good guy list. But first, as it's Newsday, let's discuss some, news. And the first story, an unexpected twist in the Charlton story, Kieran. I think this pod in the early months was based on many strange stories that had my eyebrows raised, and to be fair, the eyebrows are fairly well disciplined these days. It takes a lot to surprise me, but this story, when it turned up this morning, genuinely did surprise me.
Yes, Charlton's present owner, as far as we're concerned, Thomas Sandgaard, who again appears to be in the good guy list. Yeah. He's discovered that over the course of sort of the last 9 months prior to his arrival, the club seemed to get into a habit of signing more cars than footballers. And the cars tended to be rather nice ones. So I think they had about 700 grand's worth of cars acquired. Including quite a nice fleet of Range Rovers. And it looks as if one of those Range Rovers is going to be a prize for a fan. And I think sort of the deal is if you sign up for the iFollow system, your name will go into some form of draw. So, that will be absolutely amazing. But it's indications that when owners come in, unless there is some form of monitoring, things can go awry. So, how much money was spent in various schemes and elements of wonderment. We await to find the sort of the full audited figures, but I don't think Thomas Sandgaard was particularly impressed with what he inherited. Especially at a time when the club has been in and out of having transfer bans. So if you can't afford to sign players, but you can afford to go out and buy cars, it doesn't reflect too well on the previous owners.
Well, there are a couple of things in this story, Kieran, because on the face of it, it's one of those hilarious comedy club owner stories that we're so used to. And of course, when you unpack it, it's far from hilarious. Because first of all, you're talking about 10 top of the range Range Rovers, and I was desperately trying to think of a word earlier that was like top of the range but didn't also have range in it, because I hate repeating words in a sentence. So first of all, how does a new club owner surreptitiously acquire 10 top of the range Range Rovers without somebody at the club noticing? Secondly, Sandgaard said this is a symbol of how terribly the club was run by these previous owners, and that implied quite heavily that these Range Rovers were being used by people other than the club staff. But also, I don't understand quite why Sandgaard is legally able to give one of these away as a prize, because it's not his club at the moment. I thought the whole terrible last couple of weeks had left the ownership of the club in limbo. Is he still officially the club owner, subject to any court decision?
Yes, I think we look at these things in turn. If somebody acquires a company, then legally they're entitled to do whatever they choose to do. They are the shareholders, they are the directors, and therefore, when it comes to decision making, it falls into their lap. Now, unless there is a system of checks and controls, then they are free to use and abuse as much as they so desire. So it does appear that if these stories are true, then some of the people involved have. It's a breach of moral and ethical duty that they have towards the club, but clearly they didn't appear to have any morals or ethics, so that didn't particularly bother them. In terms of Thomas Sandgaard, I mean, he has been paying the bills since he acquired the assets that were sold to him by East Street Investments. So I don't think he's allowed to control East Street Investments, but the company was allowed to sell him the assets, presumably including these cars. If they've not paid cash for them, then there must be ongoing leases, and perhaps what he's just decided to do is perhaps to give some of them back to the lease companies, to minimise his losses. But it could be that he's decided to, as a sign of the nature of the behaviour prior to his arrival, he's probably going to pay one of those up and give this out as a prize, which will be fantastic for whoever receives it.
Yes, well, I'm going to guess, Kieran, this story is true. It only emerged last night. Guy sent it to us this morning to add on to the current news stories, but it comes from a London news website that's relatively reputable. And I know, as it happens, I know the journalist under whose byline the story appears. So it might be that we can get him to have a chat with us and give us some more details. But again, we've asked producer Guy this. We will be contacting Charlton Athletic, the previous owners, to get their side of the story, because they won't react, as Steve Dale constantly refuses to react. But we're becoming increasingly aware that we should at least give the other people in these stories the chance to reply to us. And Kieran, these are words I was really hoping I would never get to say on this pod again, but there are problems with Wigan Athletic and the consortium looking to buy them.
Yes, this has been dragging on far too long, and it's to do with our good old friends, the owners and directors test, or the old, or the fit and proper test in old money, and it appears to relate to somebody called Antonio Papadopoulou.
That's easy. That's easy for you to say, Kieran.
Yes, indeed. And a sort of a mini statement came out from the EFL in that they are not in a position to transfer ownership, i.e., somebody who is involved in the consortium to acquire Wigan Athletic has failed an aspect of the owners and directors test. And this is a little bit odd, because there are, as we know, that there are broadly two elements to satisfying the owners and directors test. First of all, you've got to have proof of funds. Now, given that it appears to be in relation to one person, you would imagine that collectively they've got to be able to produce proof of funds, because you might have one person who's front of house, another person who's sort of the person at the back providing money, and provided you've got a group of 2 or 3 people, and it's they've got to show we've got 3 million quid. If they can show 3 million quid between them, all fine. The other element of the owners and directors test is they have got to be seen to have no outstanding legal claims against them. So legal. So it could be that one of them has something that has cropped up, which has piqued the interest of the EFL. That they've, as usual, that they've not really given any details, which unfortunately in the world of social media has generated a lot of speculation. So I went onto the internet to Company's House, which is my second home these days. And
once the Baroness kicks you out, Kieran, which will inevitably happen, you may well have to be kipping down at Company's House, and I'm sure they'll let you in. I have these elements. It's like an old-time 50s black and white film where the old chap on the door says, "Here he comes. Here's old Kieran's spreadsheet. He'll be living here one day." And sure enough, you'll turn up with a sleeping bag. "Oh, she's lost patience, did she?" She did, yes.
yes. Too many references to Moscow.
Yes.
So I've been looking at a new company which was set up a couple of months ago called AFC Wigan Athletic Limited,
Right.
and there's been musical chairs taking place in respect of this company over the course of the last 3 or 4 days, and it does appear that some of the directors have gone, and Antonio Papadopoulou is no longer deemed to be the person in control of AFC Wigan Athletic, but instead that control has been transferred to an organisation called House La Fuente. So I did some more digging up, and it turns out that House La Fuente is a real estate company based in Legon in Spain.
Right.
And last year, its turnover was about $190,000, which doesn't appear to be a huge amount. Now, it could be that I've picked up, I could have done a wrong Google search here, and it's not. But my concern is that if the stories were true, then the prospective owners of Wigan were from Spain, and this is a Spanish company. Now, are we putting 2 and 2 together and getting too many? I'm not certain, but the progress that we'd hoped was taking place in respect of Wigan hasn't materialised, which is a shame. I mean, they won at Sunderland on Saturday, which was they've had a series of pretty grim results because the administrators have sold all the assets, including all of the players that had both a left and a right foot, and hasn't really left very much for the footballing side of the business to deal with.
So in general, Kieran, if you've got a consortium of 5 or 6 people looking to buy a club and the EFL have problems with one of them, would the consortium just quietly drop that one from the bid and then just sort of bring him back to help out when it's over? Or do they have to physically show proof that he's no longer involved, his money isn't involved, or his crime has been, his debt to society has been paid?
I guess when you put forward the people, the owners and directors test, if one of them fails, they would have to evidence this, and the fact that the shares have been transferred away from this guy, I think that would help the case. We have seen the administrators extend the exclusivity period that the prospective owners have, which presumably is because the administrators believe that they have the money. Remember, the administrators are on a 1/3 uplift. I think they're getting a $300,000 bonus if the deal goes through. So it's in their interests for the prospective owners to pass the test as well.
Would it reflect badly on the administrators, Kieran, if they were to put so much weight on a deal that eventually was proved to have nothing behind it?
It certainly isn't going to enhance their reputation. That they could end up looking like chumps if 6 weeks has been wasted with a consortium that didn't prove to actually have the resources behind them. All I can say, again, going back into the dim and distant past when I used to do this type of work, is you do end up kissing a lot of frogs in the world of insolvency. There's a lot of glorified tire kickers. There's a lot of people that will claim to have this, that, and the other. And to a certain extent, you've got to have them at face value. And normally you get rid of the complete nitwits and fantasists by insisting on some form of goodwill deposit. So I can only assume that the administrators have done that. But it's a bit like buying and selling a house. You've got to get the deal over the line, and until even exchanging contracts, it isn't the end of the story.
And this question's just occurred to me, Kieran, and it's probably a question to which the answer is much longer than we've got. So maybe it's something we can defer. Is there nothing that you can't learn from Companies House?
Well, if the information is genuine, then you can pick up an awful lot of information in terms of background. But remember, most companies these days are not audited, so you have to take things at face value. Companies House, unfortunately, is hugely under-resourced, so it can't chase companies as much as perhaps it should. So that's why we've got the likes of There's two clubs in the Championship, one of which is Sheffield Wednesday. And would you care to guess who the other, who have not submitted data going back to the middle of 2019?
I say this with a heavy heart, but it's going to be Derby County, isn't it?
It is Derby County, unfortunately. And that reflects not particularly well in terms of the governance of either of those clubs. And I know they'll say it's all to do with the EFL charges, but in my view, that's a nonsense because they must know the accounts themselves these days. So you can find out an awful lot if you are if you've got a forensic mind and have no personality. And as I tick at least one of those boxes, then that's my second home.
You see, yeah, it really is like being married, Kieran. Sometimes you do put me into situations where there's no right answer to something that you've just said. So we'll move on. We've got some interesting news about stadia up and down the country, but first a quick trip to Scotland, which we always enjoy. And Hearts have released their latest figures. What do they tell us, Kieran?
Well, they show that Hearts are very fortunate to have some incredibly good benefactors. The club was losing 56 grand a week last year, but there's a guy called James Anderson who seems to be a philanthropist who also has got a bit of a soft spot for Hearts. So he put in £3 million. The Foundation of Hearts, which is sort of the supporters organisation, that put in another 600 grand to effectively offset the day-to-day losses that were being made. But it is tough. I think Hearts fans, when I put up the data on social media, I think they were quite surprised to find that Hearts were relegated last season, and they have a wage bill which is 3 or 4 times that of some of the other clubs in Scotland, which I think came as a surprise to them, or perhaps 2 or 3 times back. But another interesting nugget from the back pages was that they spent £646,000. Remember when Scottish football went into lockdown, and Hearts were relegated based on the position they were in the table at the time. So that they took that up with the SPFL and the SFA. I think they ended up having to go and pay costs for the other parties as well. So over 640 grand went to our good friends with their silver tongues, who I suspect they will now be looking at Range Rover brochures. And so perhaps they should get in contact with Charlton, and they might be able to get themselves a bit of a discount on some of the ones that were potentially going back.
See, even the worst news stories are good news for someone, Kieran. Someone in your world, in the world of finance and law, there are very rarely 100% losers. Now, good news for Coventry fans, Kieran, because they could be returning to the Ricoh Stadium next season, but for an unusual reason.
Yes. I mean, they could do on the back of COVID, which seems a bit bizarre, because at present, the Ricoh Stadium is effectively owned by Wasps Rugby Club, but because they're not able to host matches themselves, they are suffering huge losses, and it's estimated to be around about £5 million. So their future is in doubt. Now, Wasps said to Coventry, "We don't want you there anymore," because they were in dispute with Sisu, who are this mysterious, I think it's Bahamas-based hedge fund. Now, Sisu are taking Wasps and the council, or perhaps it's just the council, to the European court to try to claim that they should be the rightful owners of the Ricoh. Coventry have been playing at Birmingham St Andrews, or the Trillion Trophy Stadium, as it is officially now known. But crowds have dropped to 6,000, although they're in the Championship. I still think it's a great effort from Coventry fans.
Absolutely.
But it's less than half than they were getting at the Ricoh. So there's now potential talk about Coventry taking up an option if Wasps and Sisu can stop behaving like squabbling children and return for 2021-22. So this will be good because Wasp will receive some rent. I think we're all hoping that a significant element of the population will have been vaccinated by the start of next season, and therefore crowds will be able to return to a much greater extent than we're presently seeing.
Mm-hmm.
So Coventry will start to generate more money. Wasps will generate some more money. I think the intention is still for Coventry to move to Warwick University, effectively on a brownfields title there. But never say never when it comes to stadiums.
Yeah. Two things there, Kieran. I'm going to go out on a limb here and say officially it's St Andrews. I'm really not at home to the Johnny Rocks Stadium. It's Wadden Road. I watch. It's astonishing now. The very rare occasions I watch Soccer Saturday and you see the reporter going to the stadium. You go, it's not called that. Why is it called that? It's just. And also, get yourself vaccinated, kids. For the love of God, seriously. If you're a Palace fan and you're the reason that we can't have 26,000 people back at Selhurst Park, don't go near the Parsons Arms, because we've had a discussion and the Parsons Arms official policy is very much pro-vaccination, as it should be. Yeovil Town Stadium, Kieran, has been sold. Is this a good sale or a naughty sale?
I think this is probably a good one. So they sold, is it Huish Park? Is that how you pronounce it?
Yes.
Yes. The stadium, which in my experience is the toughest of all 92 to get out of if you park there, because there's one tiny exit and you might as well just go to the pub for 2 hours, which is probably not to be encouraged for most people driving.
I hate to say this, Kieran, but I've never been there because we've never drawn them in the FA Cup. So until such time as they're in the Premier League, I'll have to take your word for it. Carry on.
Right. They were in the Championship a few years ago.
I know they were, and they were one of the most famous giant killing clubs in the country as well for many years, and until the new stadium had that wonderful 9-foot drop, the slope on the pitch, which somebody once worked out that if Peter Crouch stood on the bottom end with a baby on his head, the baby would just be able to see the touchline at the other side, which is a good bit of working out.
So Yeovil Town Football Club, who are now clearly not part of the 92 because they've had a bit of a tumble recently.
They have, yeah.
They were losing £13,000 a week pre-COVID, and they've gone to the local council and said, we've got problems. Now, this has been approved by, I think it's South Somerset Council. Looking at the local press, it appears that it's not been universally popular within council chambers. But it's a 30-year lease. They've got a buyback option. They've been given a rent holiday for the first year, which is, I think, is a sensible thing to do and the right thing to do from the council's point of view. But what I found a little bit disturbing is that the rent is not disclosed. Now, if I was a council taxpayer, I'd be saying, well, why isn't it being disclosed? We as people whoever is living in Yeovil surely is entitled to have a degree of scrutiny and transparency from their local council, just as much as we would expect from as we expect from football clubs, as I expect from football clubs when I'm going through all the data. The only way we will be able to find this out is from Companies House in due course, but it will take a while for that data to come through. So whether it's a good deal or a bad deal, I don't know. It won't be as good as the deal that our friends Derby County managed to negotiate when they sold Pride Park for £80 million, because apparently the market rent for the to rent it back was £4 million a year, and they managed to discount that down to £1 million, which you've got to give them a lot of credit for that, for negotiating with Mel Morris, the owner of Pride Park and Derby County.
Derby County fans, if you're listening, seriously, I promise you, before every pod, we do a little pinky pact to say, can we try and get through without mentioning Derby County? Well, we can't. We really do try not to. And it's just occurred to me that Peter Crouch with a baby on his head was very far from the sentence I was expecting to say in this pod today. And now that's going to turn up in Martin Sell's review. Still on Stadia, Clapton CFC are raising money to fix their roof. Why is this a story for us here, Kieran?
Well, it's a story for us because we've spoken to Clapton, because it is a community club. The Old Spotted Dog is not only the best named stadium in London.
In London, in London, maybe. Yeah, I would. If you're talking about nationally, I'd go the Dripping Pan in Lewes. Would be up there. Yeah.
It's the oldest senior ground in London as well. But the club, which is community owned, has finally become the owners since July, and they inherited a bit of a mess. So there were holes in the roof, there were leaks, and they're due to have an FA inspection in early 2021. And now that hole in the roof has expanded, they've tried tarpaulins, they've tried felt, and they've also tried, and I quote, an unusual roof condom. Which,
as opposed to those usual, those everyday roof condoms that we're also familiar with, of course, yes.
That's right.
They're going for a ribbed one, presumably, are they, just to make it fine, okay.
Well, I hope not flavoured.
Dear Lord, Kieran, really, you have to... I mean, I drag it so far down, Kieran, but you just always find a level beneath that you can drag it down to.
Yeah, it does remind me of a story going way back.
Oh, no, we haven't got time for that.
But we've not got time for that.
So how much do they need then to fix their roof?
Well, they're looking for £15,000 in total, and they've raised over £10,000 to date, which is fantastic. If anybody would like to give them support, they would be appreciative. And if you want to go down a slightly different route, I can thoroughly recommend the merchandise at Clapton CFC. I've got one of their away shirts, which even for me, as somebody colourblind, I think, blimey O'Reilly, that's bright. But that's linked to their support for the Basque people in Spain. So it's got a bit of history, and by all accounts, it's gone down extremely well with with many people from who are Spanish of origin who are now living in London. So it's well worth a check out. But it'll be fantastic if Clapton could actually move. They are hoping to start playing football next season at the ground, and so they need this in order to satisfy the FA's inspection.
The Clapton story and the Clapton interview we did was one of those stories, and you can never predict. I mean, they all get a good response, but you can never predict which is going to get the better response. And Clapton was one of those stories that really touched a nerve with a lot of our listeners. So there's no reason why we can't put a link to that on our
definitely
tweet, can we? So, and I'm knowing the generosity of our listeners, I think that last £5,000 should be doable. And talking of gestures of goodwill, Kieran, in the season of goodwill, my favourite time of the year, Sunderland fans are organising a soup kitchen this Christmas.
Yes, yeah, and I think sort of food poverty is something which has touched many football fans. Yeah, we've seen the fantastic work of Marcus Rashford, and the fact that many clubs themselves have become community hubs to make sure that people don't go without food. I mean, it is a basic necessity. It's the least we can do in a civilized society. So here, a huge hats off to Ricoh Report, which is one of the sort of the Sunderland podcasts and fanzines. They are very committed towards the local community. So they've working in conjunction with the local community soup kitchen. That they've raised a lot of money, and I think a special mention should go to former player Duncan Watmore. Now, he's not been at the club for a few years, but when he heard of the plight, and he was out of work in the summer. He was looking for a new club. He's only just managed to get himself back to get a contract. So he's put in £500. I think they've raised a good few grand now, and at a time when there's a lot of cynicism and when some fans at some clubs, shall we say, have not necessarily covered themselves with glory recently. This type of activity again makes you proud to be connected with the game.
It does, and I'm going to mention the schemes that I know, because for several years now, Steve Parrish has opened Selhurst Park as a cold weather shelter for homeless people, and when the temperature drops below a certain number, that kicks into action, which is something we're very proud of. The Palace Foundation and the club are opening the kitchens over winter, over Christmas, to provide meals for people on low incomes, for homeless people. And I say that as a proud Palace fan, but there are, I would guess, every single club in the league structure, and most of them in the National League structure, will have similar stories because, as we've said before, we're only too pleased to mention the sterling work that football fans and football clubs do quietly away from the spotlight of the bad behaviour that sometimes we shine on them. And unfortunately, it really annoys me that the press, both the tabloids and the broadsheet press, never cover enough of these stories. I mean, the local people in Sunderland will be proud of what's happening because the local press will cover it. But all of these, one of the newspapers needs to have just a big centre page spread just to show that each club is doing stuff. And that club you alluded to, Kieran, which is obviously Millwall, as a club, Millwall are doing similar things. So yeah, every football fan has reasons to be proud of their club at this time of year. And again, we'll say it again and again, it shouldn't be down to bloody football clubs to have to do it. It's just shameful. It's 2020. Anyway, talking of shameful, UEFA. I used to quite like UEFA until I did this pod, Kieran, and now suddenly UEFA have put forward new proposals for the Champions League. The so-called Swiss system, Guy has put in brackets, and you can hear his almost sniffy tone. Well, it's just in just about every email he sends us, basically. But it is the so-called Swiss system. Why the so-called Swiss system, Kieran, and not the Swiss system?
Yeah, I think it is a Swiss system. Yeah, and ideally, of course, we'd have the Swiss Ramble on the show to tell us directly from Zurich. But
would we? He'd run rings around me, Kieran. I don't think that's a particularly good idea, is it?
But this is the future of the senior competition in Europe from 2024 onwards. Now, is it going to be UEFA in charge? Is it going to be FIFA in charge? Or is it going to be a third party? We genuinely don't know. But UEFA is genuinely scared that it might lose its position as being in control of the most lucrative international competition between clubs on the planet. So, how does the Swiss system work? Well, it's based on, if there's anybody that is a chess fan, they'll be familiar with this. I'd also recommend that the Queen's Gambit on Netflix, even if you're not interested in chess, that was an absolutely amazing series. And as somebody that never got I never got higher than table 6 for the school chess club. And I know you're going to be amazed I was in the school chess club, Philip. Philip?
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 Where the fuck did that come from?
That's because you said the word Queen, and immediately it led you by word association. It led you to Philip. Now I was about to say something slightly amusing about the fact that your school had a chess club, but I just recalled that my school had a chess club. Every school had a chess club. Yes, Philip. Oh, God, it's going to be a long time before I forget that. That's going to be in Martin Sell's review as well now, isn't it? See, Martin's got me second guessing, but what he's going to tweet in his review. Anyway, Terry, carry on with your story.
Exactly. So the way that this is going to work is that it looks like there's going to be 32 teams in a single division, and they are going to play probably 10, but it could be up to 14 group matches.
Oh,
and those will be clearly only against random opponents. So presumably there will be seeds, but it could be something work out so that if you finish in the top 8, you automatically go through to the knockout. If you finish in positions 9 to 24, you then go into a playoff to get into the knockout. So the aim is to avoid too many dead rubbers. Manchester City qualified after 4 games.
Yes.
Qualified after 5. The Manchester United match last night was quite intriguing, but that's the exception rather than the rule. In terms of the latter stages of the group stage, and then there would apparently be some form of relegation playoffs potentially with the Europa League for positions 25 to 32. But all of this will involve more football being played. So then we come back to Project Big Picture. What was the purpose of Project Big Picture? It was to clear the decks for something of this nature. So Is this going to involve the abolition of the Carabao Cup? I mean, certainly, when I've spoken to people in European football, because I occasionally have conversations with people based on the continent, they seemed convinced that the Carabao Cup was dead. There certainly will be pressure on the Premier League to slim down to 18 clubs, and nobody, when I after this discussion, say, yeah, it'll be really good. This will free up extra slots to allow Manchester United and Liverpool and Chelsea to play more fixtures. And I go, well, I can understand that, and I can understand why the owners of those clubs want it, because it will be very, very lucrative. But if you're a fan of Newcastle, Aston Villa, West Ham, Everton, Leicester City, Palace, and so on, how are you going to be better off each season through playing 4 fewer fixtures?
Yeah.
And the gap between the other 14, for want of a better phrase, and the rich 6, and that gap is presently, on average, £350 million. That gap is going to grow further and further. How's that going to make the Premier League more competitive? And how are you going to look forward to 2 fewer home matches a season? In terms of wandering up to the Parsons Arms, I just can't see the benefits to all of those clubs.
Well, the other thing I don't understand in this story, Kieran, is on those rare occasions when I get to speak to people in high positions at top 6 clubs, they all give the impression that they absolutely hate the group stages of the Champions League. That it's a tedious chore. That for the most part they are almost guaranteed to get through. So I can't understand what's in it for those clubs either. Because with that number of teams in there, there's still going to be dead rubbers. You're not going to guarantee a Man United v RB Leipzig every season, and if you do, it's only going to be 1 or 2. Because in under normal circumstances, Barcelona Juventus last night, that would have been a seismic shock of a result, but they both already qualified. So I can't see how that's not going to happen under this new system. All it seems to do is, as you say, aggravate the rest of the clubs in the domestic leagues, because it will be the equivalent clubs to Leicester and Palace and Newcastle and Brighton in Spain, Italy and France will be equally as annoyed, I gather, wouldn't they?
Yes, I fully anticipate that. But as far as the big clubs or the rich clubs are concerned, 4 more matches or 6 more matches in Europe means they can sell the broadcasting rights for more money.
Okay, of course,
they can have those big sponsorship deals enhanced. And it's all to do with money. It's nothing to do with sporting integrity, any of this. And I don't want to become one of those people that say, "Well, football's been ruined by money." It's been changed. There's been good and there's been a lot of bad, but this is purely a money grab.
Okay. A friend of mine some years back went to be a football coach in Switzerland, and they gave him a flat literally yards from the Swiss-French border, the most beautiful place, which is my way of bridging the gap from a Swiss story to a French story, Kieran. Because our last story before our interview with Simon Hallett, the French TV company media have missed another payment they owe to League One.
Yes, it's not looking good for domestic football in France, and
sorry, Kieran, I should say League. I say League One. That might confuse people. League rather than League One in our
in our currency.
Yeah, in case people didn't put 2 and 2 together. That's why Swiss Ramble shouldn't be allowed on, Kieran.
So there's this company MediaPro which signed a 4-year deal for around about 2.5 billion sterling to have the rights for the top 2 divisions in France. Now, it missed a payment earlier in the autumn, and apparently it's just missed another one. And we're talking hundreds of millions of euros a time. And it's saying that it wants to renegotiate the contract, that COVID-19 has had a negative impact upon viewing figures, and therefore what they signed up for is not what they're getting. Nobody signed up for COVID-19, I would point out to them.
Yeah.
And what we're seeing, and they've also set up a sort of a dedicated channel called Téléfoot Chat, which is a bit like the ITV digital broadcasting channel. So it could be that this could be a separate legal entity. So they could let this company go bust and walk away from the deal. I'll be intrigued to see the contract. French football is currently surviving on a combination of government loans and grants, with the exception of the likes of PSG and those clubs that are in the Champions League who are getting money from UEFA. So it's a very delicate situation, but I think it is indicative that the golden goose, which is broadcasting as far as football is concerned, is not a guarantee. And clubs need to be aware of this, because we saw some pretty horrendous repercussions as a result of the ITV Digital, and this could be a French version, except with a 0 or 2 at the end of things.
Okay, well, we're keeping an eye on that one as ever. Now, Kieran, as you know, we here at Price of Football Towers love a local boy made good story. And the story of Simon Hallett and Plymouth Argyle is just that. And Plymouth is a town close to my heart. I love Plymouth for various reasons. Kieran spoke to the man who bought his hometown club.
Hello, Simon. Thank you very much for joining us, and welcome to the Price of Football.
Thanks very much, Kieran. It's an honour to be invited.
Thank you. Right, Plymouth Argyle. I've got to ask the question. Any football fan would love to do this, but you're the person that actually went out and bought a football club. What made you do it? What were the biggest challenges to doing it? And was your family talking to you after you went and announced that you've just gone and bought the club?
I'll start with the first one. I actually appeared on a podcast soon after I became a minority shareholder in Argyle, and the guy asked me, what my wife said when he told me, when I told my wife that I was thinking about buying a stake, and what she said was, "You've already done it, haven't you?" So there was no real resistance from my family. I should say that my family are not really football fans. I've got 3 daughters who are now all in their kind of early to mid 30s, and they grew up during the kind of Beckham era. So they were Manchester United Premier League fans. They kind of happily came along to watch Argyle on the few occasions when we were back in Devon, but they weren't really Argyle fans. So they're kind of keen now, but not the kind of fan that I am or you are of your club. What's been really interesting on this issue, though, is that I bought it, getting back to the first part of your question, I bought a small stake originally, and it was very easy. I through a friend of a friend, I got in touch with the club and said, look, I live in the United States. There's not much I can do to help, but I've got a bit of money. And if that would help, then, please can I come on board? And it was very, very easy indeed. James Brent, the former owner, had been looking for somebody who was much more clearly a fan to become directly involved, a fan with a little bit of money, prepared to put it into the club. So the door was half open. And as the years went by and I got sucked into the business of football as well as fandom, I became a bigger shareholder. And going back again to the end part, one of the great joys for me has been that I thought this would be a bit of fun for me. But my wife has absolutely loved it. My wife is all in. She hates watching the games. She's notorious for hiding behind the sofa when there's actually a game on. She gets very stressed. But, she loves meeting the fans. She loves being part of it. The whole kind of Argyle family has been wonderful to her, and she's loved it. So if it hadn't been for that, it would have just been me as minority shareholder, having a bit of fun, and living the boyhood dream. But it's been a real kind of joint effort. Jane does a lot of work with the fans, and that's enabled me to spend more time on Argyle than I otherwise would have done. So it's really been fantastic.
Terrific. I must confess, as a Brighton fan, we all have a soft spot for Argyle, and the reason for that it was the Fans United, which was a suggestion of an Argyle fan, which which
Yeah.
saved our club. We won that match 5-0. We stayed up on goal difference. We somehow managed to survive 2 years at Gillingham, and now where we are is where we are. Sort of in terms of your relationship with the club, you mentioned that it's as much an emotional relationship as it is a financial one. Do you have sort of a vision? Because I think Argyle is one of those clubs where you think it should have done perhaps better historically than it has. It's because it's got that catchment area.
Yes.
The away support is amazing. The home support, the numbers have stayed up all this time, and now you're in a tough Division League One.
Yes.
What's your sort of vision for Argyle?
Yeah. Just on that, I remember hearing the Orient, Barry Hearn, the former Orient owner, Leighton Orient owner, talking about how potential was the most dangerous word in football. And there's no doubt that Argyle continues to have great potential. The catchment area is big, but it's got it's got the whole population of Devon and Cornwall in. Obviously, we're competing with Exeter, who are a very well run club, but historically, we've competed very successfully versus Exeter. We've also competed against Torquay, who are at the moment a non-league. But when I was a kid, it was Torquay that we called about. It's a rugby area is one of the problems. The other problem is that transport links are not terribly good. So to get to Home Park takes considerable amount of time. And I think your catchment area should be not so much how far it is to the nearest club that you're competing with, but how long it takes. And frankly, it takes a long time to get to Argyle. So it's very hard to attract any but the diehard fans. Similarly, when it comes to our away support, it's absolutely fantastic. But part of the reason why we have such a good away support is that there's a diaspora of, is it diaspora or diaspora? It's one of those words you never hear people saying, you just read. Anyway, there's a whole bunch of Plymouth people who don't live in Plymouth anymore. I'm obviously an example, but Plymouth is not a town that has grown significantly over the last 30 or 40 years. So because people have tended to leave, because job opportunities have been greater outside. So our away support is very much made up, is not largely, but a lot of it comes from people who don't actually live in Plymouth. My vision has been explicit. The board about 3 years ago put together one of these vision statements that often sound woolly and without actual implications for what you're going to do on a daily basis, but we try to do something a bit different. What we've said is that our vision is to be a successful football club supported or respected by everybody in the Southwest and many beyond. And it sounds vague and woolly, but it's actually not. The key word in that is respect. And I think that we can all agree that football, you're either a supporter of a local football club or you're not. And the reasons for supporting you discussed at length on the pod. Essentially, it's you're born with a football club, and it's very hard to shake it off, even if at the times you want to. But respect has to be earned. And you can earn respect by, winning football games, being a successful club. You can earn respect in being well managed by treating your fans well, putting on a good product on a regular basis, and so on. And the classic example in Devon would be the Exeter Chiefs. I'm not a rugby fan. I've been to see the Chiefs a couple of times, but my goodness, I do admire what they've done. Not just because they're European champions at the moment, but because they've taken a small club. They've run it with discipline. They've run it with financial discipline as well. It's been extraordinarily well run, and this season it's borne fruit. So I would like Argyle to be respected by people who don't even follow football, and to do that, it's meant that we've had to change culture. We've put in new management in the last couple of years. We've gone through the club and put in very, very good management, ranging from our chief executive officer, who used to be the COO at Anfield. It's actually it's interesting how he's ended up at us. But we've changed everybody from the CEO, the chairman, to the CEO, to the groundsman to the chef in our hospitality area. That, it's been even more obviously our manager. In the past, we had people who were doing a great job, did do a great job bringing Argyle out of administration, operating on a shoestring, but we thought we needed slightly different people who could operate under slightly different budgeting environment. So our vision is that we want to gain respect. The way we're going to do that is by being a well-managed club, playing not just good football, but providing good opportunities for our fans and potential fans on Saturday afternoons and beyond. We gain respect by doing great things in the community via our community trust. And, we gain respect, I think, by being financially sound and not putting the club at risk. So all of those, I think, will mean that we will be not just a successful football club in terms of league position, but a successful club in terms of what not just our fans, but the wider audience thinks about us.
That's terrific. I mean, that's music to our ears. We've been,
Sure.
I wouldn't say that we're a campaigning show, but certain issues to do with the governance of the game have become increasingly evident. And all I can say is that you've never come within a million miles of our wrong-uns list, which is a good thing to do, because a football club is so much more than just football. And it's
absolutely.
Great to hear that.
Well, it's interesting. You said it was a mixture of, I think when in one of your previous questions, you said something about a mixture of emotional and financial interest in Argyle. I mean, I've spent a lot of money on Argyle. I've invested a lot of money in Argyle, but I have no expectations of a financial return at all. This is entirely emotional involvement for me. And the cost is the money that has gone into it. If I get it back one day, that would be great. But if I don't, that's fine as well. Football, people say that football is a business and people are operating in a business-like way. I'm in the investment management business. Our job is to invest people's savings in companies, and we do that on a very long-term basis. So we try to identify good businesses and own them over long time periods. So to do that, we analyze their competitive position, we analyze their financial strength. We think about how they're going to compete successfully over decades. And then we think how our clients are going to make money out of being shareholders. The only way you make money out of being shareholder of a football club, unless you're the kind of person who wants to get on your naughty step, is by selling it. And you know perfectly well, Kieran, that the value of an asset from an investment point of view is the present value of the cash flows associated with it, discounted at an appropriate rate. There are no cash flows. The day that Argyle pays me a dividend is the day that the fans hate me. So I'm not going to get any dividends. So, if it's a business, it's the worst possible investment that it could be.
That's fantastic to hear. In some ways, not clearly from an investment perspective, but no, I absolutely understand where you come from, and I for my sins, as you know, monitor all 92 clubs via Companies House and websites and so on. And I get approached all the time by people saying, "Well, we're thinking of investing in a football club." I say, "Well, why? Because you're not going to make money from it."
No, unless you sell it to a greater fool. And sorry, that's a kind of, I mean that technically, I don't mean that people are complete idiots to buy football clubs, but they are idiots if they think that they are sensible financial investments. They're not.
Yeah. I mean, I think there's many people who are successful in other aspects of life who believe that therefore they can transfer that Midas touch to the world of football, but football is a way of spitting you out and chewing you up. So it is a very tough industry.
But it sucks you in first, Kieran. That's the trouble.
Yes.
Sucks you in, then spits you out. It is a tough industry, but I think it's a tough industry because there's a lot of money hanging around football. So it does attract some bad eggs. But it's also that there's this great emotional attraction to football. And, that mixture is very, very dangerous. The mixture of investing and emotion is about as dangerous a mixture for your financial health as you can get, I think.
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. I mean, we were talking a little bit earlier about the fact that Argyle do have a good, solid fan base. And that's a great thing, but it does mean that, of course, a significant proportion of your revenues are coming through the turnstiles.
Yes.
How has COVID hit you? I'm sure you've, as a person that works in finance, you've got all your budgets for worst case scenario, middle. Has it been worse than you possibly thought when this all started?
It's been about as bad as we possibly thought. When this all started, actually, soon after it all started, about May, June, we started running some quite wide-ranging scenarios about what could possibly happen. And we thought that the worst that could possibly happen would be that we'd have no fans in the ground until basically next season. And as a result of that, I injected a bunch of money in the club that would enable us to survive on that basis. So Argyle's financial future is not in doubt for this season and probably for a large part of next season. So, we basically took care of what we thought was the worst case scenario. What's been really telling at Argyle, though, hasn't just been the lost ticket revenue. That's been significant. But I should note here that our fans have been absolutely magnificent. I talked about our vision being one of gaining respect, and I'm not going to pretend that we haven't put our foot wrong at all over the last few years. We do make mistakes, but by and large, our fans have come to respect the job that the club has done, and the fans have responded by helping out financially. So we sold what we thought was the number of, when I say sold, we allowed people to renew tickets, season tickets this season, up to the number of people that we thought would be allowed in. And the indications back in July, August were that when we reopened, we'd be able to be at about 25-30% of capacity. And Argyle's capacity at Home Park after the reconstruction of the grandstand is about 18,400. So we sold nearly 5,000 season tickets to existing season ticket holders. So that was obviously, tremendous source of cash flow. We sold it to the people on the grounds that they, would not be able to get a refund, that if they weren't allowed to come to the ground, we would give them a iFollow match pass at no further cost. But then when the time came and we were going further and further into the season without being allowed fans in, we kind of went back on that contract and said, look, we realize that times are tough in Plymouth. We don't want people who, had jobs when they paid their 400 quid, but no longer have jobs to, have that 400 quid still in the club. So we did actually go back on the contract and say to people, look, if you want your money back, you can have it. Almost nobody asked for their money back, which is just extraordinary at a time of hardship in a town and area that is not, the wealthiest in the country. So our fans have been magnificent, and I think that reflects all the good work we've done over the last few years. So we've been saved by me putting money in, by our fans being very, very supportive from a financial point of view. Where it's really hurt us, and it's been absolutely as bad as we thought, was that we haven't been able to make use of the grandstand. So part of our financial vision has been that, like the Exeter Chiefs have done, we would be able to take the club's biggest asset, its stadium, that we invested a very large amount of money in, and that we'd be able to use that asset for high quality activities that would generate revenue for the club throughout the week, not just on a Saturday afternoon. From an investment point of view, the worst thing about owning a football club is that the return on investment is partly a function of what's called your asset turnover. Basically the revenues you get relative to the size of your asset, and your asset is constant throughout the week, but your revenues only come in for an hour and a half on a Saturday afternoon. It's crazy. So we'd had this goal of turning Home Park into an entertainment centre, and we had bookings for Home Park through the end of last season. We had concerts at the end of season. We had some quite big concerts, 20,000 people booked, that were going to be big revenue earners, and that's all gone out the window. We kind of assumed that we would be able to get back to revenue generating activities, and they've been knocked on the head again in the last month or so, at a time when our staff, I talked about changing management. We've got very imaginative young manager of hospitality who's come up with tremendous ideas. At Home Park, until it was stopped, we were putting on roast dinners, we're doing high teas, we're doing stadium tours, we've had food trucks outside, we've had a Christmas market, all ways in which we could generate revenue. But a lot of those have been knocked on the head. So it's not just been ticket revenues that's been lost. It's been, our whole strategy of generating higher amounts of revenue from our biggest asset, our stadium, which we bought back about 4 years ago from the council. That's been knocked on the head, and that's been damaging as well.
Yeah, I mean, we've spoken on many times on the show that clubs don't seem to sweat their assets.
Correct.
And it's a strange approach. It's not a cathedral. Yeah, it is ultimately the place where you're going to generate a huge proportion of your revenues. So let's turn it into something which is desirable. And I think you're absolutely right to go through the infrastructure route and then to have something which is desirable for a variety of purposes has got to be the way forwards. And certainly when I was looking at the figures for the Premier League and the fact that Spurs, and I appreciate that last season was curtailed early, but Spurs managed to go from effectively nowhere to overtaking Manchester United in terms of match day revenues. Yeah, they've taken the approach, and I think you're doing the same in Devon. And when I hear some people connected with the game saying, well, we're only open 20 to 25 days a year, I go, well, why are you only open 20 to 25 days a year? It doesn't have to be locked up for the rest of the time. So, I commend you on that.
I should say that. Sorry to interrupt, Kieran. I should say that this was very much the vision that the previous owner, James Brent, had. James is in the kind of hospitality industry. He owns the local thing called the Pavilions, which is a kind of regional event. They own the physical assets, and then they organise the events that go on. So it was very much his vision that that's what we would do with Home Park. It's the brand of the football club is very powerful. People like their football club so long as their football club does a good job over and above results on the pitch. And people just love having meals, even on a Thursday afternoon. They love having high tea in view of the pitch. People like having conferences. And going back to the Exeter Chiefs, this was very much the model that Tony Rowe put in place at Exeter. Somebody at Exeter Chiefs once said that they've got a fantastic hospitality and banqueting operation with a reasonable rugby club attached. Now they've got a fantastic operation with a fantastic rugby club attached. So good on them. But those kind of assets, hospitality, banqueting, conferencing assets, are very scarce in the Southwest. And it's and again, it's part of the reason for doing it at Argyle, for financing at Argyle, that this is an asset for the city. It's an asset for Argyle, obviously, but this is a good thing for the city to be able to attract conferences. We can now put on a conference at Home Park for over 400 people, which is not on a global scale, but on a regional scale, that's pretty significant. And that brings people to the city. It brings people to the hotels. It brings tourists in. It all brings money to the city and to the area, which is a great thing, I think.
Yes, yeah. I think Norwich are another classic example of doing things the right way, and that gets noted, especially if you are a town or a city which is slightly off the beaten track.
Very much off the beaten track. You don't need to beat about the bush. It's miles from anywhere.
But if you get that reputation locally, then A, they'll come, and B, they'll come again, and that's the most important thing. So I really think you're taking the right approach. I mean, just going back to sort of the geographical issue, from sort of moving on to slightly more of a footballing area, does that make
Excuse me.
the job of the football recruitment team and so on? Is it harder to attract players to Argyle than other places in the country, or are footballers by nature nomadic given the nature of the industry?
Every time I ask this question, I'm told that few footballers are by nature nomadic, and they just want to play football. It's just the money. If you pay them, they'll come. I actually take a slightly different view, and we've taken steps and will continue to take steps to make it a more attractive place for footballers and their families, frankly. I think Tony Pulis once said it's very easy to manage a club in Stoke because you're never more than 50 miles from grandma. And, people forget that footballers are young men. Yep. They have young wives and partners. They have very young kids. And that's a pressurized time of life. And it's particularly high pressure for, their partners, their wives, if they have young kids and they don't have access to babysitting. So I do know that the footballers themselves respond by having very active WhatsApp groups. They form mutual support groups. Some of the footballers have told me how it actually creates bonds amongst footballers and their partners. But I think there's more that we can do. We have somebody whose job is to take care of the footballers, make sure they don't have any problems. But I do think, frankly, it's an area that we need to address, partly for hard-headed finance. If we get a reputation as being an attractive place for a family, and let's be clear that Plymouth is a fantastic place to bring up a family. The fact that it's not terribly crowded means, you're within 20 minutes of open moorland, you're within 20 minutes of the beach, and, real estate property is relatively cheap. So it's a great place for a family. But the dad is away for Friday through Saturday, and probably back and sleeping early on Sunday morning. The demands on young footballers are intense, and I think that anything we can do to help their support, help them, would be better. We're actually running a study at the moment on the impact of home advantage. We have a wonderful natural experiment going on here with no fans in the stadium. Is it the effect? So we can, analyze the data and come up with whether or not home advantage comes from having fans or whether it comes from not having to travel. And our suspicions are that part of the home advantage comes from not having to travel. Argyle players have to travel a lot. That causes pressures on their well-being, on their kind of mental health, if they're worried about their partners. And, we'll be looking at ways that we can address that and make sure that Argyle becomes a place where footballers want to be because it's good for them and their families as well as for their playing careers.
Terrific. I mean, this has
more
been
to be done. More to be done.
Sure. I mean, and it's always an ongoing beast. At the minute I think you think you've got it nailed, then somebody's going to overtake you. So this has been.
No, I couldn't agree more. Well, and you're fighting football culture, which is that footballers are nomads. It's all about the money, and it's just can't possibly be the case. Human beings care about their families. They care about those things, and if they're not looked after, they worry, and that affects their job performance. I don't see why football should be any different. When we hired a new manager, one of the criteria was that he treats footballers like human beings, which is not to disrespect how our previous manager treated them at all. But we wanted it to be absolutely clear that the days of if somebody makes a mistake in a game and gets a good kicking when he comes in at halftime are over. You can't treat people like that anymore. You have to be sensitive to their feelings, and I don't want to get all sorry. I know that I'd upset your podcast partner's father, but the days when you can treat footballers like lumps of meat and give them a good kicking when they behave badly are well over. And in Ryan Lowe, we have somebody who's very empathetic towards the needs of footballers because he's been a footballer around the lower leagues for a very long career himself, and he's quite close to that. So he and Steve Schumacher are are very sensitive to the needs of footballers. Not oversensitive, but sensitive.
Terrific. Well, this has been an absolute eye-opener for me, Simon. So I really appreciate, first of all, your time. B, what you've done for Plymouth Argyle, and we get an awful lot of contact from an awful lot of fans from all over the country, and we know who the good guys and the not good guys are. And all I can say from my experience is that your fan base do appreciate everything you've done. They know that you're on their side, which not all owners are. I'd just like you to wish you all the best for the festive season, and hopefully a return to more fans to allow them to come and appreciate the team and see you whiz up the table. And then we can have a South Coast derby in the Premier League in a couple of years, or because this random South Coast link, which doesn't appear to exist on any other coasts.
I love it. I love it. It's actually I was in the we have an organisation called the Green Taverners, who was part of the refurbishment of our grandstand, arranged for financing and then arranged for construction of a fan building where they have these fan fests on a Saturday afternoon, and these fan fests are open to fans of other clubs. And I was actually playing my ukulele on stage there at one of their fan fests, and I got accosted by a bunch of people wearing blue and white, and it was Brighton fans. So Brighton fans still come and watch Argyle if Brighton don't have a game or something, and there they are mixing with Argyle fans in our fans building. It's just fantastic, and it does remind everybody that there is a football family, and I don't want to get too soft and teary-eyed about it, but the football family does stick together and support itself when times are tough. And it's just wonderful that Brighton fans still are welcome at Argyle on a Saturday afternoon, and some of them want to come, so that's great.
Terrific. Okay, thank you again, Simon. Stay safe.
My pleasure. Yeah.
All the best.
He's definitely on the good list, isn't he, as far as Santa is concerned?
Oh yeah, very much so. Yeah. Simon is an absolute delight. He understands the club. He understands the relationship it has with Plymouth, and he wants just the best. And again, he's one of those guys who says, "I'm a custodian. I'm not. Don't think of me as the owner. I just happen to have been. I'm fortunate. I'd actually use the word very smart, and has been a success in business, which has allowed him to come back. And he has financially supported the club superbly to date, and he has plans to progress it as well. Which, if you are a Plymouth fan, I think it's something to be excited about.
Yeah, it's almost impossible, isn't it, to talk about Plymouth without using that terrible, terrible phrase that they hate so much, sleeping giant. But I mean, if they ever do reach the Premier League, man alive, they've got a big catchment area, haven't they? They'll be one of the success stories. And their away support is astonishing, really is astonishing. So, that's a story we'll all keep our fingers crossed that they continue to do well. But as fans know, at least they're in safe hands now. Before we go, Kieran, we'd both like to thank all. What's Postman again?
Postman again, yeah.
Yeah. So we'll tell him Philip says shush till just to the end of the pod. I love that there's not a peep out of that dog, and it's proper 70s sitcom dog not liking postman stuff. That used to be a thing, kids. That used to be, along with somebody trying to chat somebody with long hair up and then discovering they were a man, which was a big staple of 70s comedy. The postman being attacked by a dog was another big staple of 1970s comedy. I was going to say kinder, gentler times, but they really weren't. Yes, we would like to thank all of you who took part in our quiz on Monday night. We had over 120 players in the end, and some brilliant team names, including my friends in Wales who call themselves Spreadsheeps. POF for BAFTA, which is great. Kevin's cat, Bobby's amortization, which is great, and many, many more. And the look, as I said, on the Baroness's face as Russian girlfriend came from nowhere to win first prize. It was an absolute treat, as was both your Christmas jumpers. We'd like to thank as well Football Manager, The Athletic, and Manscaped for donating prizes, which will be on their way to you. Hopefully, that's being organised by producer Guy. All those team names I mentioned will be getting top trumps. We will be doing the quiz again because, frankly, we had a lot of fun doing it, and it's actually really, really nice to put some faces to names and to actually have people from all over the world taking part, Kieran. And it's this time last year we virtually didn't exist, and now we've got people all over the world making each other laugh. I stopped looking at the message boards in the end because I realised they weren't messaging us; they were chatting to themselves, which was very funny. So, and I know you'd like to add your thanks to them as well, Kieran.
Yeah. It was very warming, and it was good fun from our point of view. I know some people have only ever thought as the Baroness as being inflatable because nobody in their right minds would have anything to do with me. So, so that was good as well. And a big. You must be crazy, but we love you for it. To our Hong Kong correspondent, who got up at 2:45 in the morning to join in the quiz. Sadly, didn't win a prize, but I have sent him a set of top trumps for the sheer dedication to the show. So thanks very much to everybody. And until then, stay safe, look after yourselves, and we've turned a corner with the vaccination. So look forward to seeing more and more of you in football, hopefully soon.
Yeah, because that 2000 made a big difference. And I have to say as well, it pains me to say it, but very, very, very well done to Tottenham fans and to Brighton fans who made the very public gesture of clapping their way through the taking the knee, which was very much appreciated. And just, of course, to say it's questions time the next pod. So if you do have any questions on any aspect of football finance, email us on questions@priceoffootball.com. And as Kieran says, hopefully there are brighter times ahead. But till then, stay safe. Bye-bye, everybody.
The price of football. The price of football.